Okay, so welcome. This is part of Midwest University Virtual. I don't know if that's the official name for it, but that's what I'm going to call it. We were supposed to meet live in Minnesota back in March, and obviously, given current circumstances, that didn't happen. So we've been trying to do as many of these virtually as we can, and I'm pleased to have been asked to give my session Revit timeline to you today. So my name is Paul F. Aubin. I'm an author and a consultant. So I've got over 30 years in the architectural industry. I've written a bunch of books and videos for LinkedIn Learning. I'm an architectural consultant, member of the Volterra Detroit Foundation Board of Directors. That's why I was giving my little shout out to Italy there. So I spent a lot of time in Volterra, very lovely place. And of course, I'm a husband and a father of 3 kids. And those of you that got here early heard a little bit about what they're up to. I've just recently updated and released the latest version of my Revit for Architecture book. So I've called it Revit Essentials for Architecture. I changed the name slightly from the previous edition because I wanted it to sync up a little bit. The content is similar to my Revit Essentials LinkedIn Learning course, although it's different data sets, different lessons. So they're not exactly the same. It's not that one is just the book version of the other, but they cover the same level of material, if you will. So I thought it made sense to kind of sync up the names there a little bit. So there's a link there to the book page, or you can just scan that QR code. But it's been completely updated for 2021, assumes no prior knowledge of Revit, and phases is one of the topics that is covered among many others. You can get it both in print and Kindle ebook, and I'm considering possibly doing EPUB in the future. I just haven't decided yet. Also, some of you may know me from LinkedIn Learning. So I have lots of courses up there. So that link there is an affiliate link. So just in full disclosure, if you follow that link and you subscribe to the library, then I will get a little affiliate payment for your following that link. It's just a small stipend, I guess you could say. Phasing and design options is currently a course in the library. It is available, but it's back, I think it was 2015 or 2012 even, maybe, when we recorded that. So I literally have just re-recorded that course in the last couple months. It's not live yet, but it will be very soon. Like, it might be dropping today, that soon, kind of thing. So it could be today, it could be next week, but I'm sure it'll be this month for sure. But it'll be completely updated for 2021. So if you want to follow up to today's session, you can check out LinkedIn Learning and try that course. But of course, I have lots of other courses available, including my weekly tips, tricks, and troubleshooting. So every Tuesday-ish, sometimes it's later in the day, sometimes I don't see it till Wednesday morning. But anyway, there's a new tip every week. At least that's the goal. All right. And then finally, if you're interested in contacting me for consulting services or anything else, questions, whatever you might have, you can just reach out to me on the contact form on my website. All right, so that's a little bit about me. What are we going to do today? Well, we're just going to talk about phasing in Revit. So I'm going to assume no prior knowledge. We're just going to dive right in and kind of talk about what it is, how to set it up, and maybe a few other little tidbits along the way. I got to keep reminding myself to look at the clock here so that I don't go over time, but I forgot to set up a timer, so I'll just sort of try and remember to do that. All right, so let's go ahead and just start right in. So I do have a few slides to get us started, which is going to talk about the overview of what phasing is and how it's approached in Revit. And then I'll do the rest of the session live in Revit, and we'll just do some examples. So, and now I guess I should mention on the chatting and the Q&A, we've got both a Q&A panel and a chat panel. I just realized that I was only looking at the Q&A when I was asking people where they're from. And so now I'm seeing lots of other, I've got a Memphis, I've got India, Houston, Texas, Sudan, Minnesota. So thank you all for telling me where you're from. It's great to see that we've got this sort of global coverage here. So thanks very much for that. But if you have a question about anything that I'm talking about, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A panel, And I've got it kind of open on the side. I'm going to try and glance at it every so often, and I'll try and answer things live as we go. But I may just not get to it right away, so I might jump back and do that a little bit later. So don't feel like I'm ignoring you if I don't answer the question right away. Okay, and I think Justin from ATG stayed on as well, so he might tackle some of the questions that that don't necessarily need me for. So if you've got some logistical questions or even general Revit stuff that he can handle, then some of those might get answered faster by him if he sticks around, and I appreciate his help in doing that. Okay, back to phasing. So phasing is really focused on architectural. And I want to say that because if you're a contractor, if you're in construction, phasing is a little primitive for your use. You could do it, but I think you'd find it a little bit lacking. Okay, so this isn't a replacement for the functionality you'd get in, say, a Navisworks or something like that. But what it's meant to do is your overall key points in time, construction phases in your Revit projects. So if you were to start a brand new project in Revit, you would have two phases to start off with, existing and new construction. And if you think about it, every project has at least that, right? Because when you start a project, no matter what it is, if it's a brand new building or if it's some renovation, there's always something there that you start with. So if it's a brand new building, you've got a piece of land, and that's existing. And then everything else would be new construction. And obviously, if it's a renovation, then there'll be some sort of structure there that will also be existing that you will then interact with, and some of that you might demolish, and some of that you might keep, and some of that you might modify, and so on, okay? So that is the basic idea, is that phasing is introducing time into your Revit projects, okay? So each phase is a key point in time. So if I kind of mapped it this way, if we imagine we've got the past on the left and we've got the future on the right, then it's really this timeline that sort of moves along your project. Now notice that I've plotted construction at the top and demolition at the bottom. So I think one of the key things to understand about phasing in Revit, and that a lot of folks kind of don't get when they first start using this tool, is that demolition is not a phase. Demolition can occur at any phase. So each phase is just a set of bookends that you set in your project. At this point in time, we called this existing. This is what was already there. And then at this next point in time, it's phase one, new construction, and we're going to do these things there. And among the things you can do in each phase is you can create objects, or you can demolish objects. So those are the things that can occur at those points in time. And so that's why I say demolition is not a phase itself. It is something that can happen at every phase. So keep that in mind as we move forward here. So if I took that little illustration that was on the timeline and kind of expanded it out to kind of make this a little bit more clear, this is what this is the sort of little simple file that I have for this session. And that reminds me, before I continue, I forgot to mention that there is a handout that goes along with this session. I've got the PDF of it open right here, okay? So you are welcome to the handout. And there's also a data set. So this simple little file that I'm showing right here is also provided in a couple stages as well. And where you're gonna find that is on my website. So this is my website here. And if you go to the conferences link right here, then Midwest University is still showing at the top because that would have been the most recent conference that I did this year. But since conferences have all stopped, I suspect it's going to keep this position for quite a while. So it's right here at the top. And here's Revit Timeline Understanding Phasing. And so I actually have this in a couple versions. So if anybody is not using at least Revit 2020, then there is a 2013 version of this session that I did some years ago. It's obviously been fully updated for 2020 for MU, and I'll be showing today in 2021. But when you download the data set, it'll be in 2020 format, and you just simply upgrade it if you're working in 2020. 2021 rather. Now, over here, there are several other session topics, and all of this is free. Anybody can download it. You don't have to sign in or anything like that. You're welcome to any of this material. And these are all just handouts and data sets from previous sessions that I've taught at a variety of industry conferences, including Midwest University for several years. So you can search through the archives if there's other topics that you're interested in. And then, of course, I mentioned books and videos earlier. You can find information about those, how to order, and how to subscribe here on my website as well, with those links at the top. And if you want to contact me, the contact link is right there, and there's a little form. You fill it out and that'll send me an email. Okay, so forgot to mention that before, but if you want access to these simple little files that I'm going to be demonstrating from today, then you can download them and use them on your own. All right, so back to our little simple example here then. Let's say we had this little building like this. In the existing phase, the only real demolition that's taking place here is that we're going to do some regrading of the site. So maybe this gets demolished, right? And then we build this little new structure next to it in new phase 1. But then at the end of new phase 1, we also demolish the little chunk of building in the middle, because we're going to replace that with something new. So that happens at the end of phase 1. And then when you get to phase 2, that's no longer there. And we create that new connector building instead and build a new roof for the existing building. And then this is what it looks like at the end of it. So that's just sort of like a really simple illustration of what a project might look like that has multiple phases. Now, obviously, you don't need multiple phases, but I think it's easier to understand the tool. And when we talk about demolition occurring at more than one phase, or at any phase, having more than one phase makes it easier to understand that. Okay, so we've covered that the phases are key points in time. Now, the other aspect, or the next aspect that I want to talk about, is that the geometry in your model gets assigned to these phases. And there are two geometry properties that are available for any model element in Revit. So doesn't matter what kind of model element it is, walls, doors, windows, roofs, they all have these two phasing properties. And that is the phase they were created and the phase they were demolished. So the phase it's created is always going to have some value, obviously, because if the minute you create an object, it will assign it to the phase that you're working in. You can always change that. The phase demolished will default to none, meaning that the object is not being demolished. It still exists. But if you decide you want to demolish that object at some point in time, then you simply choose the phase where that demolition will occur. Now, that's everything for phasing for your model. The real important stuff happens with the views, or I think anyway, the real important stuff happens with the views, because simply assigning the phases to the model, that's sort of step 1. But to really understand what's going on with the timeline of your project, you need to set up a series of views in your project that convey that information. So views also have two phasing properties, but they're slightly different. It does have a phase. So there's the phase that view represents, or that phase that view shows. And then there's also something called a phase filter. And a phase filter is, like other filters, allows you to change graphically the way that elements in that view display, but based on their phasing parameters. Okay, so it's the phase filter that makes demolition a dashed line, for example. So if if you don't have a phase filter applied, you won't have any way to tell graphically on screen that you've got demolition in that view. Okay, so that's a real simple example of what a phase filter is going to do for you. All right, so let's look at another simple example here. This is just a little graph that's trying to, I like to think of the way phasing works in Revit is, think of it almost like the lifespan of your model, right? So these are just simple objects. These are just walls, but they could be anything. And what I'm doing is plotting the lifespan of these objects across the phases in the project. So You know, at the top we have the past, okay, our earliest phase existing. At the bottom we have the future, our latest phase, phase 2, and then, you know, we have some other phase breaks here and here to indicate when we move from one phase to the next. Now, on the far left there, we have these 3 elements that were created in the existing phase. In the middle, we have 3 more elements that are created in phase 1. And then in phase 2, we're adding 2 more elements. So at the moment, there are no phase filters applied to this view. So notice that all of the objects look exactly the same. So it's impossible for us to tell if I hadn't plotted them on the graph this way. Okay. Now, in this case, what I'm trying to convey with this is when the objects were created and when they met their end, right? So if you think of demolition as the end of the life of that object, then that's what I'm trying to convey here. Okay. So these 2 groups of objects, okay, so the 2 on the left and then the 2 in the middle there, those were both demolished, or all 4 of those were demolished, but they were demolished at different points in time. Okay, so again, this idea that demolition can happen at more than one phase. These 2 here in particular are what Revit thinks of as temporary. And the reason that they're considered temporary is because they're both created and demolished in the same phase. So if you do that, if you set both the phase created, phase demolished parameter to the same thing, Revit will consider that a temporary element. Okay. Now, in some of your projects that are more complicated, you know, temporary construction for you might span, if you had a 5-phase project, you could have a structure that you built that goes from phase 3 to phase 4, and then it gets demolished in phase 5. Well, unfortunately, in Revit won't think of that as temporary. Okay. And so it won't get assigned to the temporary graphics. Okay, is what I mean by that. So the only way that the temporary graphics get assigned to the element is if it's both created and demolished in the same phase. Okay, so some of this stuff is hard-coded in, and you need to understand what the limits are so that you can work with it. Okay, so just keep that in mind as well. All right, so the objects at the bottom here that kind of poke all the way down, those are not demolished ever. So they're going to exist at, you know, into the end of the project. So just to kind of recap this, let's look at it from the point of view of one of the phases, because again, at the moment, it's very difficult to tell what's what, other than, you know, I described it to you, I kind of pointed to things, but, you know, looking at it, there's no way to tell. So the different graphics that get applied to elements in a phased model are completely dependent on the view that you're viewing them from. Okay. And so what I mean by that is I will often share the Back to the Future analogy. Okay. So if I kind of scroll through the paper here, right, here's a illustration of the 2 phases, by the way, or the 2 phase properties, by the way, you know, phase created, phase demolished. But if we think about, you know, the movie Back to the Future, and I'm sure that most of you have seen it, and if you haven't, you definitely need to see it. It's a classic. You know, in the background there, we've got existing and new construction, what you would get in a normal project if you just started from the out-of-the-box template. So just to have a little fun, I created a project and instead put the different times that Marty traveled to in the DeLorean and made those phases. Okay, and you can see those listed in the foreground. And then, of course, you know, 1.21 gigawatts. Who could forget that, right? Okay, so if you were in 1985, where the movie starts, Marty's got his nice little suburban home, and, you know, Biff comes home and had wrecked the car. You know, we all remember that scene, right? But very familiar setting. Well, when he gets in the DeLorean and outruns the terrorists, and then something weird happens, there's flashing lights and all this other stuff, and he gets a little confused, but he still hasn't figured out what's happened yet. And so what's the first thing he does? When you're disoriented and you're uncomfortable, what do? You try and go for something familiar. So he says, I know, I'll go home. This is just a bad dream or whatever, right? And when he gets in the car and he drives home, this is what he finds, right? So what happened? Where's home, right? Well, imagine it from the point of view of phasing. What we've literally done is taken the DeLorean and gone back in time to a point where his house didn't exist yet. Okay, so his house didn't exist yet. So that is why it's not there. So if we consider current phase one, okay, then what happens is, whoops, okay, sorry, there we go. So then what happens is all of the elements in that phase are now going to change the way they display graphically, or let me phrase that again. Sorry, I said that wrong. All of the elements in the model are going to change the way they display graphically based on that phase. So if we set a view to phase one, so we're in the DeLorean and we set the time circuits to go back to 1955, right? And at 1955, this is what the world looked like. So right over here, these elements existed already. So they kind of use that gray color. And then these elements over here were new. So the ones on the right are that dark shaded black, right? But this stuff here in the middle has been demolished. So instead of showing as either gray or solid black, they show in those dashed lines. And then, of course, this one is using a crosshatch and a blue color because it's both created and demolished in the same phase, so it's temporary. So those are the 4 different conditions that can be applied to things. And then, of course, over here, you remember there were some walls? Well, this is Marty's dilemma right now. This is Marty's house. It hasn't happened yet, okay? So that's why those elements are not displaying at all. Okay, I saw that somebody raised a hand, and I don't know how to see that because I don't see it. Oh, there it is again. So if there's a question, I think you have to type it in. Just raising your hand, I don't think I can give you, I don't think we're doing audio here. So type in your question and I'll do my best to answer it. All right, so that's what's happened if we look at it from this point of view, right? From phase one. Now, if we changed it to phase two or to existing, we would see something different, right? So here is what it would look like if we went back to existing, okay? At the existing point in time, we only see those 3 walls on the left, and they are rendered as new walls because they are new at that point in time, right? Yeah, I'm trying to remember the scene. I think there was a scene when he went back to the high school and it was all, he's like, wow, they really cleaned this place up, right? You know, because it was 30 years earlier. So it was much newer than it is today. Okay, so that's what we would see from the existing phase. If we move to phase one, we've already talked about what we would see there. And then if we move to phase two, at this point, some of the elements are long gone. So if you consider these ones here in the middle, right? Notice those aren't even there anymore, but this one and these guys now are being demolished, okay? So it shows a little differently, and only this one right here is new, okay? So if we keep going forward to the next one, this is finally what it would look like at the very end, okay? So when the project is all done and all the demolition is long gone, all the changes have been made, everything looks the same because at that point in time, now it becomes the new, you know, it's sort of the as-built, right? This is it, everything's the same now. And then we pass it on, and if a new project takes place in this building, then all of this would be the new existing and the whole thing would start over again, right? So conceptually, that's where we're at with all this stuff. I think that was the last slide I wanted to show you here before we jump into Revit. Yeah, you've already seen this, right? You know, the and this. So and then finally here, right? So this is again, I'm kind of equating these are the view settings of the view itself, and I'm kind of equating that to the time circuits in the DeLorean here. So here's a fun little one. This is the one that has the Back to the Future stuff in here. So if we think about when Marty first got here, you know, he back in 1955, he crashed into Old Man Peabody's barn, right? So here's when we still had Twin Pines, and then right here, is the DeLorean crashing into the barn. So we now have this as demolition, and there's the DeLorean. I've got it as temporary, right? Because it won't be there for long. And of course, we've demoed one of the pines. And then when he gets back to the future, well, now we only have the one existing lone pine, and you know, changing the name of the mall. So anyway, just a little fun there. Okay. So let me close this one, and let's go ahead and look at, you know, some of this stuff in practice right now. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it sounds like, oh, that's the construction equipment. Yeah, sorry, if you hear some weird machine sounds in the background, they're rebuilding my street right now, so there's not much I can do about that. So hopefully only I can hear that and you can't, but at first it was a little distracting because I was like, what is that? And then I remembered, oh yeah, that's right, they're doing construction outside. Turning my road from existing to new. Okay, so here's that simple little building that we talked about, and any one of these elements at the moment, if we select them and look over here at properties, you will see down at the bottom that there's the phasing properties, and currently the phase created is new construction and the phase demolished is set to none. And that would be true of any of these elements. So if I select, you know, everything here, you're going to see the same thing. Now, if I deselect and I scroll down here instead, you're going to still see phasing, but notice that the two properties have changed because now they are showing the properties of the view itself, right? So you always want to pay attention to what it says up here. And it says that we're currently looking at the floor plan. So now we're seeing the phase and the phase filter. So notice that the phase of this view is set to new construction. So that means if you were to draw something new, it will automatically inherit the phase of the active view. And if this was supposed to be an existing wall, then I would need to change it, at which point the graphics would adjust. If I change the phase of the view to existing instead, then any new element I draw will take on that existing phase. So one of the things that you want to consider doing when you're working with a phase project then is to have objects that, or views rather, that are assigned to each phase. Now, there's an open question here that says, am I going to talk about what happens when doors or windows or curtain walls are demolished and the host infill and all that stuff? Yes, I'm going to get to all that, but I'm starting with the basics here first. So I'm going to say that that was answered, and I definitely will discuss all that. So let's just change a few of these things so that we can get each of the four conditions. So I'm going to take this wall here and make it existing, and you'll see it changes to gray. If I do the same thing with this window, this is what the question was asking about. This currently is a new wall and a new window. But if I take that new window and I change it to existing, then it will change to gray. But that's a little bit weird because how can you have a window in a wall that didn't exist yet, right? So let's do that in reverse. Let's instead take this wall and make it existing. But notice that it doesn't automatically make the windows existing. So if you wanted the windows to be existing as well, you'd have to select both of them before you make that change. So what we got instead was these two windows are now demolishing holes in the existing wall in order for their placement. And the same would be true if you came in now and added something new. So if I added a new door into that existing wall, the same thing would occur. It needs to demolish a hole in the wall in order to receive that, that new door. And of course, if I delete it, it will just return or go back. This is built-in behavior. Now, sometimes folks aren't happy with this behavior, and unfortunately, there's no way to turn it off. So you just have to kind of work around it if it's not what you want. But if you think about it, for most cases, it's pretty logical, right? I mean, that's what would need to happen. You can't very well add a door or a window to an existing wall without cutting a hole first. So it's taking care of that for you. Okay. Now, another thing will take place if you have an existing window, right? So let's say I take this window and let's make it existing. Okay, now the demolition goes away because it's created in the same phase as the wall now. But what if we are, yeah, in the same phase as the wall, but what if we took the window and demolished it in the current phase? Okay, so currently the window is set to existing, demolished is set to none. It still exists. But if I change the demolished to new construction, so now it was created in existing, demolished in new construction, now you're going to see the opposite occur. The window will turn dashed to indicate that it's being demoed, but notice how Revit automatically infilled the wall. And again, this is a built-in behavior that you can't turn off, so it's going to do that automatically. And it will create that little infill piece right there that will fill in that hole. Okay, so there are some automatic behaviors associated mostly with walls that you're witnessing right there. And again, if you think about it, it's sort of logical, but I definitely have, heard of sometimes folks having, some issues with that. And, so just keep that in mind. And those are things that you want to be on the lookout for. Now, if I demolish, this is a minute ago, I showed you if you change the phase of an object, it didn't change the phase of the inserts. That's not true if you demolish it. So if I demolish this wall, it's created in, let's create it in existing and then also demolish it in new construction, okay? Notice that that will automatically demolish the door. Because again, Revit is gonna say, well, it's not really possible for you to demolish the wall and keep the door. Right? That doesn't really make sense. So in this case, the door actually turned blue and dashed because it doesn't change the property of phase created. So the door is still created in new construction, but because the wall no longer exists, it had to demolish it. So it became temporary. Okay. Now, just briefly, since we're seeing this ugly connection right here, let me just talk about that a little bit. You've got a few solutions here, and you want to think three-dimensionally here. So there may be stuff going on up above or down below that's influencing some of this. So in your own models, take a look at that. In my case, it's a pretty simple model. So there's not really anything complicated going on up above that. So that's not really the issue here. But we can just do an edit wall joins on this condition to make that look a little bit better. So if I go to wall joins and I click on this intersection to focus on that, and then you just sort of, tab through these. So the question is, do I want the existing wall to kind of butt all the way in like that? Or would I rather have, maybe a condition more like that, So I think in this case, maybe that makes a little bit more sense where the wall that's remaining or the new construction is going to kind of butt in and the existing one this way. And then you just, kind of click the modify tool to finish out of that. So a lot of times edit wall join will be the solution there. In cases where it doesn't work, the alternative is, or it's not that it doesn't work, where it doesn't give you the option you want. What you can do alternatively is you can, select the wall. There's a little dot right here. You can right click that and choose disallow join. So you're right clicking right on the dot. Okay. If I right click somewhere else, I don't get that. Okay. So you got to put your mouse right over that little dot there and right click, you do disallow join. And now that wall, you see they're totally ignoring each other. So they're no longer joining. And then you can take that little dot and you can just sort of drag it where you want it to go. Now, of course, I'd have to do something similar with this connection, but if you want to just totally customize that joint because it's not, edit wall joins isn't giving you what you want, then you can just disallow the join. I always try and do it with edit wall joins first because then it's more automated. If you do disallow, then it's manual and you have to maintain it manually. Okay. So, all right. So that is assigning the properties. Pretty straightforward. But as we've already discussed, what makes this a little challenging, especially in a multi-phase project, is if you only have one view, then it's going to be difficult to work with this. So I highly recommend having more than one view. But let's check the phases in here first, because I actually forgot which version of the file I'm in. So I may not even have the all three phases in here. So I probably should have started with that. how do you set up your phases in the first place, right? So it's on the Manage tab, and there's a Phases button right here, and you'll click that, and yeah, you can see I've got just the 2 default phases. It says Past at the top, it says Future at the bottom. So these are in the order of time. Okay, so naturally existing comes first, then we have new construction. You can insert a new phase either before or after, whichever one you have selected. Now, if you click on the name, that's not necessarily selecting it. So if you want to make sure that you're getting what you expect, click on the number here and it highlights all the way across. It's just a little bit more definitive that way, okay? And then I could say, let's add a phase after new construction, and I'm gonna call that, you know, new phase 2, and then I will rename this one to new phase 1. So the name new construction is just a name. You can call it whatever you want. And description is optional, but if you have lots of phases, I would recommend a description because somebody coming into this dialogue will get more information about what that phase is meant to represent. Okay, so up to you whether you use the description or not. So now at this point, I could change these objects and those new phases would appear on the list. So for example, if I set that wall to new phase 2, it disappears. Why? It's Marty's house, right? And we're back in 1955 and his house doesn't exist until much later. So that's what's just happened with that wall. It's disappeared. Now, with nothing selected, okay, we can then consider the phases of the view itself. Okay, and as I indicated earlier in the PowerPoint, I really think that the phases, well, the 2 go hand in hand, but I think the phases of the view are maybe even a little bit more important than the phases of the objects, because the phases of the objects are pretty simple to understand. But where it starts to feel complicated, or where sometimes it gets confusing, is if you don't have your views set up carefully, because you're not seeing what you expect to see. Okay, so that's why that's important. So I could certainly change the phase of this existing view. And if I went to existing, everything disappears except for those couple walls that I changed to the existing phase. And notice there's no demolition because at this point in time, those objects weren't being demolished yet, right? Phase 1, we've already seen. Here's what phase 2 looks like. Everything that still remains in the model, in other words, anything that wasn't demolished yet, shows in that gray color, and then we just have the one wall over on the right as new construction at this phase, okay? Instead, what would be better to do is to actually duplicate this view a couple times. Now, in this case, I'm just gonna use duplicate because I don't have any annotation, so it doesn't matter, but you could do with detailing or dependent, be up to you, okay? But I'm just gonna make 2 copies of this, and then I will rename the first one existing level 1. It'll ask me if I want to rename the level. I'll say no. And then I'll rename this to new phase 1. I'll just do LVL1. And then this will be, let me just copy that and paste it. And then I'll change this to 2. Okay, so there's my 3 different views, but of course they're all currently set to new phase 1 because they're still duplicates. So with the view called new phase 2, I'll change that to that phase, and then the existing one, change it to that phase, and then let's see, are they all open? So here's existing level 1. Here's this one is level 1 phase 1, right? And yeah, that wall doesn't exist yet. And then here's the level 2. So now it's much easier to just switch between them to see what you want to see, okay? Now, let's go back to this guy right here. And we've got both some new construction and some demolition going on in here. So the next thing for us to talk about is the phase filter. Now, currently, the phase filter is set to the default of show all, but there's quite a few other options in here. So the first thing that I'd like to point out is where these come from. Well, that's back here in this phases dialog. So when you click on phases, we've only just talked about the first tab right now, which is you know, the phase names and descriptions. The phase filters are listed here, and notice that the first one is grayed out. So that one's built in, you can't change that. But all these others are optional. You can rename them, you can customize them, and you can add your own down here at the bottom with the new. So what is this saying? Well, show all is showing all of the new construction, existing, demolished, and temporary as overridden. New construction is the only one that's not being overridden. There are 3 options in each of these drop downs: by category, overridden, or not displayed. So by category is just use object styles, okay? So if we cancel out of this and we go to object styles, you've probably seen this before, but this is every category. What line weight do you want? What color do you want? What line pattern do you want? What material? All of that stuff. So if you don't apply any overrides in a view, visibility graphics, work sharing overrides, phase overrides, right? If you don't have any overrides applied, object styles are what you're seeing. So when something says by category, this is what it means. It means use these settings. So this is why our walls are using a bold pen 5 when you slice through them, and a 2 when you look at them off in the distance, and why our doors are a little bit lighter than that. They're using a pen 2 even though I'm cutting through them, right? So that's object styles. So that's what they mean by category, okay? The other 2 choices are overridden and not displayed. Well, I think not displayed is pretty obvious, right? Let's look at one that says not displayed. Show complete has not displayed for demolished or temporary. And the reason is, by the time you get to completion, you don't need to see the demo in the temporary anymore because it's gone, right? It's long gone. So if we were to click OK here and choose show complete on this, this is what it looks like. But here's the key. Show complete doesn't mean show complete at the end of the project. Show complete means show the completion of this phase. Super important. Notice that this wall is still not displaying here, the one on the right, okay? If I went to the phase forward and did show complete here, it looks a little different, doesn't it? Now that wall exists, but notice how everything goes back to by category when you do show complete, because the idea is now this is an as-built. Everything is the same now. We don't care when it got created because it's all there, right? So that's what they mean by show complete. So if you want to show what it's going to look like at the end of any phase, then show complete is your phase filter. It removes all the overrides and it removes all the demolition, okay? What else do we have in there? Well, there's show demo plus new, there's show new only, there's show previous plus demo, previous plus new. So let's say you wanted to show a demolition plan, okay? I don't think we have any demolition going on in phase 2, so I'm going to go back to phase 1 here, okay? So let's say you wanted to show a demolition plan. Well, that's what show previous plus demo is. So if I highlight it here, in this case, it will not show the new construction, because usually on a demolition plan, you're showing what's existing only, right? Here's the building. Oh, and here's the things we're tearing down. Right? So it's showing 2 things in that view. It's showing you the existing construction that's already there, and then from that existing construction, what we're demolishing. And the new hasn't happened yet. So that's why the new is not going to display, and we're going to override the existing. It's going to get that light gray color, and we're going to override the demolished and make it dashed. So let's try that one here in this view. And if I do previous plus demo, this is what it looks like. So only these 2 walls are existing and this one's being torn down, okay? And that's my demolition plan. Now, naturally, if I don't want to have to keep switching the phase filter, you might duplicate this view yet again. And instead of copy 1, this one is going to be your demo plan, okay? So demo is not a phase, but that doesn't mean you won't have a demo plan. So that's the other thing I think people misunderstand. When I start off by saying demo is not a phase, everybody goes, well, wait a minute, I need to show my demo. I never said anything about not showing your demo, okay? All I said was, you're not gonna go to the phases dialog, click before or after, and call this new phase demo. That's redundant. You don't need that. And actually it's confusing because in that phase you've called demo, we can still do all the things that we can do in any other phase. We can do new construction, we can demolish things, we can make temporary things. So this is really not what you want to do, okay? You want to recognize that demo can occur at every phase, and the way that you communicate and document your demolition plans is simply by the way that you set up a view. So you're going to have lots of views in a phased project. So if you've got an aversion to multiple views, you're going to need to get over that, okay? And so that's just the way that the tool is going to work, right? So how many views you're going to have really depends on how many different ways you need to, what you need to convey, okay? All right, so I see a few questions here. Let me see if I can get a couple of these knocked out, and then we're already 3/4 in, so there's just one or two things I still want to show you here. So can you demo a panel in a storefront and replace it with a door? There's a trick to that. So that's one of the things I do want to show you. So I'll come back to that. That was in the chat. And then here in the questions, would you explain topographic elements in terms of phasing? Yeah, I'm going to hopefully try and do both of those two things. And then let's just see this last one. As part of a facility management group, we handle our own internal remodel projects in Revit. Is there a better way to handle renumbering spaces? That's gonna be tricky to fit all three of these in. Okay, let me try and do all three of those things. Okay, so I'm going to close this file and open up a version of it that's a little bit more complete. So I'm going to open this one. I've called this one partial because if you want to demolish, I've got two examples in here. One is the storefront example that the person was asking about, and another one is the roof, okay? So I'm just going to describe the roof, and I'll demonstrate the curtain wall since the person asked about the curtain wall. But if we want to demo this little small building here, that includes the roof, right? The trouble is, notice that the roof is a single object, and if you select it, it's only got one phase parameter. So you can't just say demo this part of the roof, right? So the way you have to do that is copy it, paste it to the same place, and then you edit the sketches so that you have two roofs that look like the one, and then you can demolish the piece you want to get rid of. And the same is what you do for curtain walls. So at the moment right here, I have an entire curtain wall. And let's say that we wanted to demolish these two bays right here and add in a new entry, okay? So if you try and do that, if you tab in to these pieces here, why is it not letting me do that? Is this pinned or something? I wonder if it's because I'm in the, let me go to 3D existing. Okay, spin her around. Okay, can I do it now? That's weird. Oh, you know what? I probably have select pinned is turned off. That's why. Okay, there we go. Okay, these are pinned. That's why it wasn't letting me select them. Okay, if I try and select these internal elements, notice that the phase parameters are grayed out. Okay, so you can't demo a piece of this parent element. So what do you do instead? Well, again, it's kind of this little bit of a lengthy workaround, but I'm going to unpin these two panels here. I'm going to select this guy and unpin those, and then these guys down here. Now, these are all just things that I want to delete. Now, mullions you can delete easily, right? So I just delete those two, and then this one and this one, I just delete those two, okay? The grid line is, it's still pinned, so I got to unpin that. The grid line, I need to remove the middle segment right there, okay? And that gives me this one panel here. But you can't delete that, okay? Revit won't let you delete that. So what you have to do in that case is change it from a panel to an empty panel. So an empty panel is just a curtain panel with no geometry, okay? Once you've done that, what you want to do now is build a little mini curtain wall in its place. So I'm going to just draw one off to the side here, and I'll just kind of give you the basic ideas here to do it, you know, quickly. So I'm just kind of eyeballing this, right? But what's the height of this line here? That is, of course, the dimension is not showing. It's 8 feet. Yeah, I should have known that. Okay, so let's make this 8 feet tall. And then we've already got a mullion here and around there, right? So the only mullions we need are the two at the bottoms and the ones down at the top. So, you know, again, you unpin, select those, unpin, and this guy, and unpin. I'm just typing UP. So then this, right, you slide in right there. And it would be these elements that you would make existing. And notice that the curtain wall itself can be existing, okay? And all of its subcomponents then also become existing. Now, I didn't make this perfectly sized correctly, and it'd be difficult to get it in place in 3D. So you'd want to do that here in a plan view. But usually I kind of make sure that it's going to, you know, match here first, you know, like maybe use my align command or, you know, whatever technique you want to do to make sure that this is going to actually match properly with the situation that we need. And then I can come in here and kind of put it in place. It'll complain that you have overlapping geometry, but it should be fine. Okay, you get that little, if that bothers you, you'll have to drop the height of that down just a little bit to fix that mullion. Now that this is its own separate thing, you can demolish it without demolishing the entire curtain wall. So now I select this and I say, this is going to get demolished in new phase 1. Okay, we don't see anything change here, but when we move forward to the next phase, right, it now looks like that. This little chunk of curtain wall has been demolished. And then I take this guy, which has already been set up to be created in new phase 1 and not demolished, and I just sort of move that into position. So whether you're editing something like a roof or a stair or a curtain wall, any sort of complex object where you want to demolish part of it, frankly, even a wall, okay? If you want to demolish just half of this wall, you have to split the wall, okay? So if I go to split, and do that, now this half of the wall can be demolished and keep the, you know, other half intact, okay? And it just complained about rooms because it's not enclosed anymore. But now this guy I'm demolishing in phase 2, okay? So any element where you want to demolish part of it, okay, that's what you do. Okay, sorry, it took longer on that than I should have. Let me try and do the terrain thing here. So there's a couple issues with terrain. Topo is always challenging in Revit, right? There's a lot of, I mean, it's the only tool we have for this in Revit, right? I mean, there's ways you can work around it. You can build your own masses. You can use Civil 3D. I mean, there's other ways to get topography, but if you want to do Revit topography, it's the only tool we've got. So, you know, warts and all, you try and work with it, right? Building pads are also a little bit challenging. So I wanted to start off by just kind of showing that because, you know, of course, a building pad, its superpower is that it excavates your site there. Okay, so that's kind of nice. But they do have phasing properties, but they don't behave completely the way you would expect. So if I took this building pad and I moved it forward, let's say to phase 2, right, and deselect, this view is currently set to phase 1, and yet that building pad, which doesn't exist yet, is already excavating the site, which feels a little weird to me, right? And the same had happened in the other direction. If you demolish it and then you go forward in time, excuse me, even though the building pad itself has been demolished, its influence is still felt, and it's still carving your geometry. So that's one of the challenges, right? So that coupled with the fact that we have a multi-phase project here. So again, this phase is, again, 3 phases existing in 2 new constructions. this leads me to using links for this instead. Phasing does have, well, one thing before I undo that, one thing I wanted to show you, phasing does have a neat little tool called graded region. So if you want to regrade the site, like for example, here you can see it needs new grading around that building there. You could do a graded region. It will prompt you that it's going to actually demolish the existing topography and then create a new one in its place. So the graded region is using phasing. So you want to make sure your phasing is set up properly first before you try and use this tool. And then when you select this, you can already kind of see that that sort of brownish color is the demoed one, and then it created a new one on top. And then, you know, if I start moving, I'll just move a few points here, and then I'll finish it. You can see the dashed lines for the demolished topo and the new topo that I regraded. And a nice little interesting extra benefit of that is if I select this topo, it even calculates some cut and fill. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. All right, so if you can get away with that in a two-phase project, you should be able to get away with that. You shouldn't have any problem because you literally have a topo in each phase. But I found that if I tried to have 3 topo elements in the same model, it started getting wonky. So what I've chosen to do instead is to use separate link files. And there's pros and cons to this, but if I link in say the phase 1 version right here, and I'll just put it at the origin just to distinguish it from the other. Well, first of all, you can see it's been excavated around the building here. And then I just added this big mound of earth out in front just so we can tell the difference, right? Now, the others are already linked in here. And so I'm just going to reload that link. And you can't really tell what I just did. So if I select this one and I hide it, this is the final version, right? So at the end of phase 2, that mound of earth is gone. And then, you know, in phase 1, we still have the mound of earth. And then the existing doesn't have, you can see all the demo here in red, doesn't have the excavation around the new part of the building. Okay, so what we've got is basically 3 separate topographies, and they were all created from the same one. You just, you know, duplicate the file. Now the trick is setting up the phasing correctly. So if we select the, I'll just do it here to make sure I'm selecting the right one. But if we select the existing version, what you do is you go to edit type on that linked model, and then there's a phase mapping button. And you click edit on that, and you can map the phases to one another. Now, ideally, what you would do is go into each version of this link and set up the same 3 phases. But you don't actually have to do that. Like if you consider the earliest phase existing, once that site has been demolished, we don't care about it anymore. So I actually left the 2 existing phases alone. So existing maps to existing. And then if we're looking at either phase 1 new or phase 2 new in the host model, I wanted to show the new construction from that link. So this one is already correct. If we look at the phase 1 new, do the same thing, okay? Then this one does have all 3 phases, so they map directly. And then finally, this one does not have all 3 phases. Again, I just left the 2 existing ones, but what I need to change here is that anything prior to phase 2, I want it to show the existing from the link, okay? So not the existing of the host model, but the existing from the link where that topo didn't exist yet, okay? And now if we okay out of all this and we just sort of look at some different views here, we can kind of see how this shapes up. So here's existing, and it's only showing the existing site, right? That's the existing 3D. And then this one here is phase 1 new, and it's got the demolished showing in the little mound of earth. And if you don't want to see the demolished, you can change the phase filter here to show new only. And of course, the building disappeared, but at least you can see the topo, right, without it's demolished. And then where's phase 3 here, or phase 2? Here it is here. Now, this gray one is showing up here. And you're like, why is that? Well, there was one, you know, you got to be pretty diligent. I left the one step that I quote unquote forgot to do on purpose here, because in phase one new, that link, I forgot to demolish that site in the phase two. So if I open that file, and of course it's going to unload the link, select this site, I need to just simply say it gets demolished in phase two new. Once I do that, the phase mapping kicks in and it will take care of itself. So I'll close this, I'll save it, and then here I'll reload. And of course, it still looks correct because at this stage, that mound of earth has been removed. So if you kind of, you know, click through these, this is in the middle phase where we have that mound of earth, and then here's the existing. And so now everything looks correct, right? So it's a little more setup, it's a little bit more work, but that's, if you have a multi-phase project, that's what I recommend you do with your topography, because topography and building pads can be so challenging to work with sometimes that I think it's worth the extra effort to set it up that way. But, you know, of course, there's always exceptions. So, you know, we'll see. Okay, let me just look through some of these other questions here. We are out of time. So for those of you that have to go, that you had a hard stop and you had an hour, I'm already 2 minutes over. So let me just thank you very much for coming today. I hope you learned something. I assume they've recorded this. I forgot to ask that at the beginning, but it will probably be available as a recording. And then for those of you that want to stick around, I'll stay around for a few more minutes here and try and get through some of these questions here. So let's see. Okay, I didn't cover the rooms. How do you handle future phases? Okay, I'm gonna punt that one. I do talk about that in the handout here. So there actually is a little tip, like a workaround for doing future work. So I'm going to let you read that in the handout, and also in the what do you call it? In the course that's coming out soon from LinkedIn Learning. That newly updated recorded course, I also cover the same technique in there. So generally the two ways to do it is to co-opt the new phase filter or to use design options. Okay, the linked architecture file has phasing 2. Do I mimic all the phases? So you don't, as I think I just showed, hopefully you can see that on the first phase and the last phase, you don't necessarily have to mimic all of them. But if you find that confusing, it's not going to hurt anything if you do. So probably the most straightforward thing to do that would be the least confusing for everybody would be to just go ahead and replicate all the phases in all the files. And even if you're not using them in every file, they would still be there. So, but you can see I did a few shortcuts in my setup, so it isn't completely necessary. Depends on how you're using it. Do I cover phase modeling with link models anywhere? Yes, we just did. Thank you. It says it's recording. Okay, awesome. And okay, the rooms, I think, was the only thing that I kind of left out there. So let me just briefly say about rooms, and we'll make this the last question. Rooms are a single phase object. So if you look at your model, I don't know, I'll just do phase 1 new here. Here's a room. And if we look at the phase properties, there's only one phase or only one property. It's the phase it was created, and there's no demo because rooms only exist in a single phase. So if I were to create a new phase for this project, all my rooms would disappear in this project. And that's by design. So the idea is your room is the space that's defined by your model, right? So they're completely relying on the model to define what each room is. The challenge with that, of course, is you go to all this trouble to name and number your rooms. And if you're keeping a large majority of them and you go to the next phase, it's frustrating because you're like, all the rooms are gone. I got to create them all over again. Copy and paste is your best friend there. Okay. So if you're just systematic and strategic about how you move from phase to phase, you could select all the rooms that are the same and their tags, copy them to your clipboard, go to another view that's set to the next phase, paste them in, and they'll maintain all that information. And they will conform to the new shape. So if the shape of this space changes, so here it was an existing, right? And there was actually 2 rooms here. And I demolished this room separation line in the next phase. And that meant that here, the room now conforms to the full size of the room, so, or the space. So that will happen automatically simply by the fact of the way that rooms behave. So the key is you just copy and paste them, and then you only recreate the new ones that need to be recreated. So I hope that covers it. If you want to see it in a little more detail, again, that is covered in its own videos in the upcoming course. And I think I talk about that in the paper, but I honestly don't remember. So it's definitely covered in the LinkedIn Learning course. It may be in the paper as well. So I think I need to wrap it up there. See if there's any other really important questions that I didn't get to. What about phasings in design options? Sure, absolutely. You can, design options can be phased and phases can happen in design options. The two they're totally separate tools, but they work together just fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. Talked about that one. I think we got most of them. If I missed any, I'm sorry. You can always shoot me an email. Yeah, great. Okay, I think we got through them all. Whew, that was a whirlwind. Boy, it's amazing how fast an hour goes. So thank you very much again, once again, for attending. And I wish you all success in phasing or whatever else you might be working on. So everyone stay safe out there.